Welcome back to the Optimize You podcast, the place where we're helping you optimize looking and feeling your best. If you enjoy the show, be sure to share it with a friend, like, and subscribe. And let's get into today's podcast. Play that clip and then we'll just talk about it.
Ozempic's FDA approved for type 2 diabetes. Wegovy is the same thing, FDA approved for obesity. And we can use this as a tool to give people this opportunity to get their lives back. And it turns out it's a peptide. It's not really a drug. Peptides insert themselves where they need to go and they heal tissues and they're regenerative. So this can't be the horrific substance everybody was making it out to be. I started calling all my friends, compounding pharmacy friends, and I said, are any of you microdosing this? Why are we not using this for autoimmune disease? Why are we not using this to mitigate neuroinflammation? Why aren't we using this to mitigate high blood pressure? All these other conditions. And then what I figured out, which is my hypothesis, if somebody's really metabolically sound and they have good muscle mass, they just need a tiniest little touch. And so everyone says, well, what's the right dose? It totally depends on the person. So all in all, I think the longer someone's on them, if done appropriately, I think it's healing the metabolism long term. It's a regenerative impact on the metabolic health of the individual using it. My hypothesis is that we're wiring the brain through the use of these neuroregenerative peptides. So whatever habits you instill over the next however many months are going to be much more permanent. There's a longevity piece to this, and it depends. I'm not going to go off of it. I'm going to cycle it. I'm going to rotate it. Some people might want to go after weight loss initially, but then we got to find the dose where they're not losing any more weight, but they are having the impacts they're looking for. There's fertility improvement with them. You know, we're having the Ozempic babies we're hearing about because you take care of the metabolic dysfunction and people get pregnant.
I'll be the first to say, like, I'm not super well versed on Ozempic. The stuff that I am educated on or that I've heard and from people way smarter than me is it's always around like the negative aspects of it, right? Like the side effects of it. So this is kind of like one of the first very few, especially them being on Mind Pump is pretty cool. Like of essentially saying the alternative, basically saying, well, hold on, maybe this isn't a negative thing. Maybe there are some benefits from it. And she brought up a few good points, interesting points too, of first and foremost of using it as like a microdose. And so I think when we think of Ozempic or we think of really of anything or doing any form of diet nutritionally, it's always like, I'm doing this thing and I'm doing it 100%. She brings up an interesting point. Like, what about the benefits of using this specifically for obese people, to be able to microdose this so that they can do it in like little spurts. So if those of you don't know what microdosing is, it's just like instead of doing full on Ozempic for as long as you possibly can, using it sparingly, just like in little increments here strategically to get some of the benefits from it, which is interesting. I've never thought about it from that standpoint. Have you?
No, man. And yeah, I want to say as well, I'm not well versed in Ozempic either. I've just kind of, heard of tons of people using it in like the full capacity, right? Completely suppressing their appetite. I never knew about this side of it. And I mean, I haven't listened to the full podcast either, probably should, or looked into it enough to know of this, but I never even thought about that side of it as well, where there could be benefits to it for anybody in the metabolism side of things. Like she had mentioned, increased fertility, different type of neuro benefits that they're seeing with habits and stuff like that, which is pretty crazy, when you think about that, where maybe there is like something that could be beneficial for any sort of human out there. And that, if done the right way, I like that she mentioned that the dose is dependent on the person, because I think that is such a true thing in any sort of thing that we want to do here. Like anything that we talk about on this show is all dependent on the human, because everybody's different. Everybody has a different lifestyle, different habits, different things going on. And naturally, that's going to lead to a different prescription for anything out there.
And the interesting thing, she did mention habits, right? So for me, immediately I'm thinking, okay, everything that I've heard from the Ozempic side of things is, okay, I'm going to suppress my appetite, which in turn potentially isn't teaching the individual the correct habits to make it sustainable. And you see a lot of people regaining the weight after quitting or stopping Ozempic, which tells me that they haven't developed those habits. Her alternative to this, it sounds like she's like, well, maybe potentially you could get beneficial habits from this. I wonder what specifically like she's talking about. I don't know. Did you pull anything away from that when you were listening to it?
No, it just sounded like she was talking about how like it just has like neural, because it's a peptide, like it helps neural, like with your neurological function.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
that's what I kind of gathered. And that's going to lead it to like, so that, the habits that you cement over the next months of being on it are going to be more, they're going to stay a lot easier. Right. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I got from what she was saying, is that was the case. But I mean, I don't totally know. I know that, we think of it in terms of like a quick fix thing. But it sounds like what she's saying is like being on it forever, but just like cycling on and off and using it as a tool, as opposed to the main thing that you're using to lose the weight, right? It's not like
Yeah.
that's what it sounded like to me. Is like, it's like, okay, we're going to use this like alongside building habits and going about weight loss the right way to help, get your metabolism into a better place, which is obviously just going to lead to easier fat loss. It's going to lead to easier with everything throughout the process.
Yeah, which is an interesting perspective to think about it from that standpoint of like the improvements from a metabolic standpoint, the neuro improvements as well from a cognitive standpoint, and creating habits from that aspect of it, or potential habits later down the road from those sort of improvements. Maybe it's like a byproduct or something, like I'm not quite sure, but it's interesting to know that, because I've always heard that, or I guess assumed, kind of based on what I've seen, is that people don't develop correct habits of it, that have kind of, I guess, dove in and done the full thing. It's not to say that they haven't got results. Of course they get results, because their appetite's being suppressed. And the argument is that, well, since their appetite's suppressed, as soon as you take that off, unless they're assuming that they're going to stay on it for the rest of their life and their appetite comes back, they haven't quite developed those habits to have those sort of controls and relationship with food. They've kind of just been able to hit this automatic button where it does it for them and automatically suppresses their appetite. So by nature, they just eat less. And all of a sudden, when you remove that, it's like, well, the habit's not there. They haven't created that habit over and developed that skill and practiced enough times, to go through it, that all of a sudden they just go back to whatever their default is, which is probably their old habit as soon as their appetite comes back. So that's probably like the biggest challenge with it. But I guess from from a neuro standpoint, if it does create some good habits from it, I could see how it could be beneficial from that standpoint as well,
Yeah.
too. The interesting thing that always threw me off was like, people who take Ozempic, there's this huge like caveat, and it's like, it's the difference that you and I talk about between fat loss and weight loss. We always bring that topic up. And the thing that gets me is like, if somebody goes on Ozempic and they are able to suppress their appetite, they're able to consume less food, they're able to lose weight, great. The problem with that is, are they prioritizing protein, and are they in a consistent resistance training routine to help build strength and sustain, or even build muscle mass during that process? Because if they're just losing weight, that's where they're doing themselves a disservice, right?
Oh, for sure, dude. And what you were talking about, as well as what I've always saw Ozempic as, is just like this ultra crazy calorie deficit where somebody's eating 500, 1,000 calories because they're not hungry. So they're not actually really doing the legwork to develop the habit. But also, like when you have a 2,000 calorie deficit, a 1,500 calorie deficit, people always think, oh, that's amazing. Like I'm losing so much weight. And they neglect the fact that there's a large portion of that that's also muscle, right? It's muscle, water, weight. And naturally, the deeper the calorie deficit, the more muscle that's coming off your body, which is gonna in turn make it so that you can't eat as much food. So maybe, yeah, you do lose 50 pounds, right, over the course of doing this because you had this huge calorie deficit. Now let's say that 20 of that was muscle, right? Well, that's a lot of calories that now are going to be a lot harder to build, because that muscle comes off a lot quicker than it comes on. And so now you're gonna when you go back to maintenance, let's say 50 was what your goal was. Now we go back to maintenance. We're going to try to live life. Well, we're living life with a lot less calories to work with. And so for me, what this means is that I don't have as much leeway throughout the day. Maybe I can't enjoy myself as much with maybe like drinks or desserts. Eating out, like I have to really watch my calories, because maybe I'm eating 300-400 less calories than I could have if I went about this process in a smaller calorie deficit, like took my time with it and went about it in the way with, enough protein, like a small, like 500, 600, 700 calorie deficit that's going to allow me to also like keep the muscle as much as possible. We can't get away from the fact that we're going to lose some muscle in a calorie deficit, but how can we keep as much as possible? And that comes through eating more protein, smaller calorie deficits, just really going about those habits.
Yeah, if I were to see a downfall from it, the one that I've always seen is that right there. Is like, okay, just assuming that if somebody's just going to lose weight, great. And in a lot of scenarios, people who are severely overweight, like it is going to be extremely beneficial for them just to flat out lose weight, right? And so the biggest gripe with it, I think, is like of the percentage of that weight. In any time we engage in a caloric deficit, in this case, we're suppressing our appetite. Either way, it's putting ourselves in a caloric deficit. It's inevitable that you're going to sacrifice some lean body mass in the process. Being able to sacrifice as little of that as possible should always be the goal. And so that was my biggest gripe with it, is that, if somebody's not being taught the habits and the importance and the consistency of consuming something like an adequate amount of protein and going through resistance training to be able to sustain the muscle that they do have as much as they possibly can in the process, knowing that they are going to lose some lean body mass, and it's normal. But if they're not doing anything to mitigate that process, and their actual weight loss is also being accelerated by the amount of lean body mass they're losing as well, it's like, okay, well then how much damage are you actually doing to this person by doing that, right? Like by losing this massive amount of weight, most of which, or a lot of which, being lean body mass or muscle tissue. It's like, dang, like, so is it beneficial or is it not? And so you kind of go back and forth. And I think it's really interesting. Those are some perspectives that I wasn't necessarily considering, as far as from when she said that. I guess there is improvements from a metabolic standpoint from based on her video that she was saying, but that like counteracts it if somebody is literally losing muscle in the process. Muscle is one of the most metabolically demanding things that we can do to help that process and put our metabolism in a great position, the more muscle that we do have. So I don't know. It's interesting. Like you can see both sides of it. I guess, like you mentioned before, it kind of just comes down to the individual and their exact dosage or needs, I guess you could say, in their process to make sure that it could potentially be used as something to be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like what I see from that video is just, she's not talking about maybe that effect of the suppression of appetite as much. Because I would imagine, if you're taking a full dose of Ozempic versus like a micro dose, the amount that your appetite's suppressed is probably going to vary, right? It's going to be a lot different than on the full dose. And so maybe it's just like a shift in the perspective that this is like the end, like this is a way to lose weight, more to this is a way for me to heal my metabolism and get myself into a great spot where I have, where I can lose weight, and that it's easier maybe to lose weight and develop the habits that are needed to keep that weight.
Yeah. So I think if done that way, then the process or the approach would have to be much more strategic. And I think that's why she's probably bringing up like considering doing microdose and things like that. Otherwise, I think people are getting the, misconception of like, man, if I'm on it, I'm going to be on it 100%. So I guess maybe there is a micro dosage option. I don't know. I don't know if people have experimented with that just to solely try to induce like the positive aspects of it. It's interesting to me too. I wonder if like, she said the fertility thing as well. Like, I wonder, what specifically is going to help improve fertility? Is it the improvement from the metabolic standpoint, or, I wonder what she meant by that, or how is that proven to show? Because the other side of this too is you've seen I don't know if you have, but I've seen people like have severe like allergic reactions to this stuff too. And they break out with like sores on their bodies and things like that. And they're like, they respond to it like really crazy. Their body just almost like neglects it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know enough like on that side of things, but I have heard stories as well, like where there's people having like really bad reactions to Ozempic and certain things in it. And maybe that's just the way, different people's bodies react differently to different substances, different peptides, different foods, all that stuff. So maybe that's what's going on there. But yeah, I mean, on the Ozempic, like babies and fertility, I mean, somebody can't have a baby if they're not like metabolically in a good spot, right? Like you have to be like your body has to be producing the right hormones and doing all of that. So maybe there's something there where she's saying, and it sounds like she's coming from a place of like doing research on this. And I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how much research could be done, in the shorter period of time that this has been out there. But it is interesting just to kind of look at it, and something we've talked like really badly about just because of what the side we've seen. Maybe there's a different side of it that people can look into and potentially use it as more of like just a tool to help them with this process.
Maybe. I hope so. I hope there are some benefits from it, because if there are, looking at our society as like a blanket statement, our society is extremely obese. So if there are some benefits from it that can kind of like help people or nudge them in the right direction, I think it's great. Is it absolutely necessary? I don't think so. Would it be an easier option for people? Yeah, of course. And if it means like a higher percentage of people moving the needle in the right direction, then great. I'm all for it too. But I don't feel like it's in a position or a point where it's absolutely necessary right now. Obviously it's not, right? Like we have found ways, and we've created and provided information for people to completely change their lives that have nothing to do with that drug, right? So it's like, okay, are there other options and alternatives, specifically doing it in like a sustainable and longevity way? Like absolutely 100%. So I'm still I'm not like for it or against it. I'm not educated on it enough to make a decision, but it's interesting to hear the other perspective of it. Right now, if you ask me at like this point in time, I'd like to see more consistency with it. I'd like to see more research on it. I'd like to see more results on it. I'd like to see and just be a little bit more educated on it. And I'd like to see a lot more data backed behind it, because it's so new too. That's the thing. And the only way you're going to do that is like extend it over time and time again, over years, decades, whatever, just to get some really like solid data. And then from there, you can make a better decision or a better choice. I hope it is a great alternative, like you were saying, a tool that can be added into somebody's process to help enhance it and literally improve their life. And if that's the case, then I'm all for it. Until then, like my approach or my suggestion would be do the tried and true that works well. And here's the thing too, is I think our society, that the reason it's so popular is because everybody is looking for the quick fix. Everybody's looking for the magic pill. And why this is so popular and it actually works, we also have to take into consideration, like, okay, if something works so great and is so phenomenal on the surface, if we're looking at the tip of the iceberg, what's below the surface? What's coming along with that? What's the caveat? What's the catch? We always have to just kind of be our devil's advocate in those scenarios as well. And I don't want it to be just like this end all be all. I don't think it's that we can put it up on a pedestal, but we could probably potentially from the sounds of it, use some positives from it. I think more as like a tool approach, like you're saying, versus being like, yep, this is the end all be all. Don't worry about single ingredient, high quality foods and tracking your protein and resistance training and doing all the tried and true stuff. Like just completely neglect all that stuff. I don't think it's going to be like that.
Yeah.
So I think there are some benefits that could come from it though, potentially.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. I think that's a good, like, I agree with everything you said there, where, really it does take more time, right? Because even so, this hasn't really been something that they've been using in this way for very long, what it is. And this is a new side to it that we're learning about. And so, yeah, just time's going to go by. We're going to figure out more about this. We're going to, hopefully there's more studies being done on the side that she's talking about too, not just like the weight loss side. And, I know it's such a huge thing in like Hollywood and amongst celebrities to be taking Ozempic, but, I mean, naturally we're going to learn more, but it was fun just to kind of do a little different vibe podcast where we just kind of take a video and just talk about it. And, we should do this more. And we should also maybe do some things where we listen to like a full podcast on a topic and then can play maybe a few clips from it and then talk about that as well. Just try some different shit.
Absolutely. Yeah. So hopefully you guys liked this one and enjoyed it. It's a little bit different style than what we're used to releasing every week, but I like that it sparked a conversation between us that we may have not have had or looked or viewed from that perspective. So I'm glad you were able to bring that up, share that clip with me, and we were able to jam on it for a little bit.
I love it, dude. Well, thanks everybody for watching. We hope you have a good rest of the week, and we will talk to you soon.